I'm Carrie. The room was deathly quiet, and I sat on the edge of the bed, holding the digital recorder in my hands. The voice that had just come out of it was all too familiar, yet it felt like a stranger's. It was my husband, Leo's voice, promising love and a future with another woman named Mia. I remembered earlier that day, when I was in the kitchen cleaning up. The phone rang, and it was Leo. His voice was flat, a tone I'd never heard from him in our 15 years of marriage. He told me the meeting he'd flown out for that morning had been a bust. The guy didn't show up, and he was on his way home. He asked me to make a nice dinner and do a bit of cleaning, though he joked about the cleaning part. I'd always loved cleaning. There was something about turning disorder into order that satisfied me. As I went about my cleaning, I found all sorts of things around the apartment: mismatched socks, a frayed phone charger, a library book that had been renewed twice. It was like a journey through the 15 years we'd spent raising our two boys, Ethan, who was 20 and home for the semester, and Lucas, who was 16 and always leaving his shoes in the most random places. I saved the bedroom for last. It was the room I was most particular about, maybe because it was the only space in the house that was truly ours. As I was mopping, I pushed the mop under the bed, and something shifted. I bent down and pulled out a small black digital recorder. At first, I thought it was Leo's long-awaited proof of my snoring. We'd had this argument for 15 years. I always denied snoring, and he always claimed I did, threatening to record me. I found the rewind button and pressed play. Sure enough, there was my soft, rhythmic snoring. I sat down, realizing I'd been wrong for all these years. Out of curiosity, I rewound it a bit further and pressed play again. That's when I heard it, Leo's voice, speaking to a woman. He called her Mia, and the words he said were like a punch in the gut. He told her he loved her and that they'd start a new life together as soon as he had what he needed. I set the recorder down on the nightstand, my hands shaking. I sat there, trying to make sense of what I'd just heard. I started to piece together the past 12 months. Leo had been under a lot of stress at work. There were lost contracts, audits, and missing documents. He'd been coming home late, and I'd noticed him being more withdrawn. I'd just assumed it was work-related stress. I remembered a few weeks ago, when he'd come home and mentioned how Mia had stayed late at the office to help him with a file. I'd thought it was just a colleague being helpful, but now it all seemed so different. Then, I heard the front door open. Leo's familiar sounds filled the apartment: the key in the lock, the shuffle of his shoes in the entryway. He came into the living room and stopped when he saw me sitting in the armchair, the recorder on the end table beside me. His expression changed quickly, from surprise to uncertainty. He crouched down in front of me and asked what was wrong. I picked up the recorder and set it on the coffee table without saying a word. He looked at it, and something shifted in his face. He sat back on the couch and ran a hand over his jaw. "Okay, you found it. I was going to tell you about the snoring," he said. I told him I'd listened past the snoring, that I'd heard the conversation with Mia. His face went blank, and he asked me what I meant. I repeated the words I'd heard, and the silence in the room was overwhelming. He stood up and said he needed to go. He promised to come back and explain everything. I sat there, alone in the apartment that had felt like a home for 15 years, but now it felt like a foreign place. He was gone for a little over 2 hours. I didn't move much, just made some tea and left most of it. I sat in the kitchen and then in the living room, trying to distract myself. Just before 9 o'clock, I heard the key in the lock again. Leo came in, looking exhausted. He sat down on the couch across from me and said he'd talked to Mia. She'd confirmed everything. It turned out that Leo had a brother, Max. Max had been the first child of Leo's parents, Henry and Grace. Henry was a kind-hearted but sometimes naive man, and Grace was strong-willed and protective. Max had worked in the family business, but he'd been feeding proprietary information to a competitor. When Henry confronted him, it was a huge family fight. Max left and cut off all contact. Sometime in the past year, Max had found Mia. He'd approached her slowly, built a relationship, and then told her his story, claiming the family had pushed him out and that the company should have been his. Mia had gone along with it at first, helping Max with the regulatory complaints and tips to competitors. But at some point, she'd started to doubt him. She'd made a recording of one of their conversations, hoping to have evidence in case things went wrong. Leo had grabbed the recorder on his way out of the office that morning, thinking it was the company's shared dictation device. "The voice you heard wasn't me," he said. "I thought about all the hours I'd spent in the armchair, piecing together the evidence against the man I loved. I knew he was telling the truth. I could feel it in the way he looked at me. He apologized for not telling me how bad things were at work. He said I shouldn't have had to go through all that thinking. I looked at him, thinner and more tired than he should be, but still the man I loved." He then said he'd been thinking on the drive back. He explained that if I didn't snore, he never would have bought the recorder. If he never put it under the bed, I wouldn't have found it, and Max would have kept causing trouble for the company. "Your snoring may have saved the company," he said. I couldn't help but laugh. It was the most absurd and yet the most relieving thing I'd heard in a long time. We sat there, side by side on the couch, as the apartment settled around us. The small sounds of the refrigerator, a car passing outside, filled the air. It was a reminder that our home was still intact, and our marriage, though shaken, could still be mended. Looking back, I realized that our 15-year marriage had been a journey of trust, love, and a few misunderstandings. And through it all, that little argument about snoring had, in a strange way, led us to uncover a much bigger problem and find a way to fix it.